Hello, welcome to Focus on Fantasy Romance, episode number 57, a podcast where we discuss books, genre, industry, and our geeky lives. I'm your host, Elle Klaus.
I'm ARD Clerk.
Everyone's muted themselves.
I'm Paulina Woods.
Electra Gatus.
And today we have Anna Lowe.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. First, thanks for having me here. I'm Anna Lowe. I write a little action-adventure romance and a lot of paranormal romance. I love shifters of all kinds. I actually started out with only wolves in my Wolves of Twin Moon Ranch series, and I moved on to wolves and bears in my Blue Moon Saloon series. And both of those are interrelated series with a Western slant. And they connected to my Shifters in Vegas series, which has a lot more humor with some kind of zany antics in it as well. So it's paranormal romance with a little bit of that angle on top of it. In 2017, I started an exciting new series, which is called Aloha Shifters Jewels of the Heart, which is basically, if you think Magnum PI with a shifter twist, then you know what it is. It's got all kinds of shifters with dragons, tigers, bears, wolves. I love alpha heroes. I love strong heroines and strong settings. And a lot of those are inspired by my love of travel and the outdoors.
Okay. So when people say Magnum PI, I think of mustaches for some reason. Your characters have mustaches.
Yeah, it's neat because you get a strong association, I think. I have a bearded bear, but no, only mustache. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's probably for the best.
Yeah.
I think there's a reason those went out of style.
It's so funny because as a kid, growing up as a kid, I just adored that show. And going back, if you watch the reruns, you're like, wait a minute, I still enjoy it, but it's very outdated, to say the least. And it's quite shocking. Some of the things you're like, wow, they got away with that, huh? Not just the mustache, obviously.
There's a lot now that Netflix and everything is streaming. There's a lot of shows that I remember loving as a child, and I've tried to watch them now as an adult, and I'm like, I can't. I just can't do this.
Okay.
So you said you wrote Shifters. What originally drew you to that sort of trope?
Yeah, it kind of caught me by surprise. I was never a fan of romance, and I wasn't really aware that shifters existed. But then I got my first Kindle, and somebody kind of turned me on to there's free books, right? You can just go and look up the free books. So I started experimenting and just looking, what I would like. And I came across, I think it was the first one I read was a wolf shifter. And I don't know, there's something about it. I guess I've always loved animals, and that idea that you could transform, and it adds kind of a mystical element, which I really like. And even though I characterize it as paranormal romance, a lot of my books have a kind of a fantasy layer as well, with maybe some mythical characters, or the Aloha shifters have these magic, I don't call them magic, but these stones, like there's a ruby and a diamond, and they have magical powers. So it's kind of fun to combine those things.
Aside from the shifting aspect, do you find that you prefer writing other tropes, like there's friends to lovers, or like bad boy redeemed? Do you gravitate towards any of those type of tropes when you write or when you read?
The ones I really, almost every one of my books has been a second chance romance. Whether in my contemporaries you see that, and in my paranormal romance too. Lately I've been getting away from it, but I think that's the one I gravitate to naturally. Maybe that's my husband and I are a second chance, you can say. We kind of got together, we broke apart, we got together again. So I guess that speaks to me more than any of the other tropes. But of course, I'm playing around with different ones just for fun. And I did an amnesia story just for fun. And it's just totally different and totally fresh. So yeah, you can layer anything you like, which is neat.
So when you sit down to write your stories, is there any particular theme or takeaway that you want your readers to have from the story?
Yeah, it's funny. As I write a story, I don't usually start out recognizing my own theme. I don't know if this happens with you, but as the story goes, then it starts kind of coming out. And then when I go back and edit, I'll draw it out more. And very often the themes is things like, it might be trust. And you think in the beginning, the heroine might think it's about trusting the hero, but in fact, it's more about trusting herself. Things like that. I've also had, I find that my bad guys they parallel a lot of like real life bad guys, kind of like racial purist groups and kind of xenophobic groups and things like that kind of echo. I don't do that on purpose, but somehow when I think of my bad guys, those kind of themes that we often hear about sneak in.
What are some lovable characteristics of your characters and some not so lovable characteristics of your characters that you can think of off the top of your head?
I think I write extremes. So I write in series, and like my first series had 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and they each got their own story. And they were, especially the brothers, for some reason, I don't know why I do this, they come out total opposites. So you have the real, the uber alpha, and you have the guy who's like a really fun guy. They're kind of opposites. So they both have their real strengths and their real weaknesses, but it kind of depends. So I guess if you took Boone is a wolf in Aloha Shifters, and he starts out and he's too much fun, right? He can't get serious. So he's one of those guys that is great to be around, but do you want to end up with this guy? In terms of how responsible is he? But over the course of the story, he grows and becomes, I guess, pretty perfect. I guess toward the closer you get toward the end of the book, the more positive characteristics come out.
So when you set out to write a story, do you plan on making it a series, or do the side characters tend to take on a life of their own and require you to write their story?
I'd say both. In every case, I've set out knowing that I'd like to write a series because I just enjoy expanding a world. And even though they're not alternative worlds, they end up being very much own, a whole new world in a sense. And I'll outline the series. For example, the Twin Moon Ranch series, I started with the 4 siblings, so 2 brothers and 2 sisters. And I thought those would be books 1, 2, 3, 4, but it ended up being 6 books because in between, side characters kind of jumped out and just begged for their story to be told. So that happens as well, and I think it'd be silly to ignore that that character knocking on your head because they can be very authentic.
I'm having trouble unmuting myself today. Sorry. So while they were talking, see, look, I have a whole list of questions, but I won't ask all of them, I promise. First and foremost, I know that you write mostly shifter books. Do you believe, or do you have insta love, like where they meet and instantly one or the other knows that that's their mate and that's who they're going to be with and they fall in love? Or is it more of a slow build?
I usually have because a lot of the books are second chance stories, so they have a backstory. Yeah, so something happened in the past, so they've already gotten to know each other, but then some misunderstanding or some twist of fate took them apart. So I like that because it's kind of more authentic. It's not like the insta out of nowhere insta love. Mm-hmm. But I do also have the books where, really it is this, the classic shifter thing where the shifter will recognize his mate. But it still grows over there, and at least they feel the attraction. And I think that's not so different than, kind of real life, right? Because you can meet somebody and there's just something there, right? Or you meet somebody, there's just nothing there.
Yeah,
So it's really just an exaggerated form of that.
true. When I met my boyfriend, I loved his arms.
Right? Oh.
7 years later, I still love his arms. So I don't know if that's insta love or just insta arms.
Mhm.
So you write both contemporary, paranormal, and you write it all under the same name. So what made you actually do that without doing pen names? Like, I know most authors do pen names, but you kept it all under one name.
Yeah, and I knew I kind of went back and forth because I was kind of aware of the issue, but I think I was just intimidated by setting up, trying to be two people, and I'm just me. And it's as a working mother and a writer, it's so much work already. So I thought, no, I'm going to write under me, but I think the covers and the blurbs clearly state what each book is. Yeah. So if you look at my contemporaries, you'll see a sailboat, you'll see a beach. The blurb will tell you that it's romancing the stone kind of story. Whereas if you look at my paranormal covers, there's a moon, there's a claw, there's a hint of the paranormal there. So I haven't heard from any readers who kind of got mixed up. They're like, oh my God, this is not what I was expecting. Oh my God, there's a dragon in my book. That has not happened, or there wasn't a dragon. What's up? So I think you can clearly brand while still being an author. I think that probably the important thing is the heat level. So you don't want to shock people like, oh my God, this book is, the door is closed, and that book, you're in the bedroom.
Yeah.
It seems to me like that would be the one that you really need to work on a different name, just to make it easier for everybody.
And do your reading interests kind of coincide with this? Like, do you read both contemporary, paranormal, or do you have just one set that you actually read more of?
No, it's a good question. Yeah, I read anything that strikes my fancy. So, and might be romance of different kinds, or it could be completely not romance. I didn't start in romance. I was one of those people who, like, you saw, well, this is going to date me, but you'd go into CVS and you'd see the rack of Harlequins in the clinch, the clinch covers. And
Yeah,
oh my God, that is so not me. But then I ended up reading a few. I was like, wow, these, some are extremely good stories, and they really speak to you when you have a strong character and a strong kind of that yearning feeling that I wish, but I can't have. Yeah, this kind of thing. So whatever appeals to me, I'll read, basically. But I don't have that time. You are right. When you're finding any spare minute you can to write, it's hard to do a lot of reading.
You're talking to the person who just read 40-something books. Anyway, so right now at any given time, most authors or readers have a book that they're reading, even if they're not actively reading it. What book are you actively reading or trying to read at the moment?
What did I started rereading a book from a long time ago, but it's slow going just because of the amount of time I have. 100 Years of Solitude, totally not romance. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, such a good book, and with such amazing humor that comes out of nowhere, and this whole community and you don't get mixed up. There's so many characters, but they come in and they come out, and it's like you're part of this town. And I love that.
But I've never read it.
Oh, it's so good. Such a good book.
I'll add it to my list of read this year. I mean,
better get cracking.
15 days.
In 15 days, I can probably read 20 books. Don't challenge me.
That's amazing.
You were talking about your alphas, about your males. One of the things that we kind of talk about a lot is the alpha versus alpha assholes. And do you write mostly of, like, the alpha is more like the caregiver, the asshole is like he demands things, this is my way, your way, highway, I don't, so which one do you really prefer to write?
Because I do a lot of the opposites, like I said. Even when I don't write brothers, I end up, a group of, so the Aloha Shifters is a group of special forces veterans who end up retiring to be caretakers of an estate on Hawaii. So they're not brothers, but they're kind of brothers. And they're different, right? So all of them are alphas, are very strong heroes. And some are more of the classic, the leader alpha, and I don't have time for a lot. But I think in my earlier series, I was, you grow as a writer over time. And I think in my earlier series, my first hero, I think some people have seen him as more as the alpha hole, which was not intended, but like really a kind of, he grew up, this is the way to do it. There's only one way to do things. And in order to lead this difficult pack, I have to do, I have to lead with an iron fist, this kind of thing. But I always have very strong heroines who don't put up with any of that crap. And they very quickly put them in place.
That was what I was going to ask next. It was about the women in your stories. I know you say you write strong women. And we were talking before the podcast started, and you said something about my lead characters. So what do you consider a strong female lead? Is it one who wins through manipulation? Well, I can't even say that word right now. Or is it more a gentle guidance? What do you consider a strong female?
Yeah, I guess I would really shy away from manipulation. Kind of with that kind of implies a little bit of maybe devious intent. I don't know. just a woman who's willing, I guess she's a person, she's standing on her own 2 feet. She doesn't need the guy to come in and rescue her. But boy, is life better when he comes along, kind of, she's doing just fine. But along comes this guy who makes her life that much, it gives a new dimension. So they're usually not too brassy in the sense of, like they'll turn up and suddenly start, in terms of the heroine turning up and suddenly start, shouting orders or something, but really doesn't take any, like calls the guy on his mistakes or saying, wait a minute, what did you just say? Or you want me to what? Just kind of being very clear about what she can do and what she can't, what she'll put up with. And even there's some who are, almost all of mine end up being athletic women, kind of, and I'm not saying that's
they have to.
I mean, part of it is you write what you know, and I've always been an athlete involved in different sports, so I guess it kind of comes out. Not all of mine are, but there's that kind of undercurrent, so they're confident, but they might be thrown into, very often my heroines are, more of the time they're human. And the guy might be a shifter. So she's thrown into this world that she wasn't aware of, but she has to kind of stand up to some pretty formidable forces, but she's strong enough to kind of give it a try, and not to run away from what needs to be done.
True. Okay, I have one more question. I'm going to turn it over to Electra. Sorry, lady. So which comes first when you're writing? Does the title or the story?
The story. I really struggle with titles. Oh my God, I'm trying to design my new series now. And it's so hard. Or you think of a title, but it's, somebody else has it, right? How many books named, Obsession? I don't know. Or, the title that you think really says it has been used. So the story 100%. And then trying to get it into something that's evocative and catchy, but not too long, and that can fit on a cover. That's the hard part.
See, I wish I was like that. My titles come, and then no matter what I do, I can't change the titles. Like literally, the titles are there, and they're like, "Fuck you! This is what we're doing." I'm like, "But nope, nope, fine."
I need to come to you every time. I'll come to you when I'm stuck. I'll say, "What is the title?"
The title and the character's name. How does your character's name develop? Do they come and tell you their names, or do you have to actually actively search for them?
Both. There's the characters that just jump into your mind, and they're just dying, screaming to get out. And sometimes it's really just writing down as quick as you can, because it's all just coming from wherever it's coming from. And other times it's much more of a mechanical thing. I'm like, wait a minute, okay, I already have a Ty, a guy named Ty, so I have to be careful what I name, Ty and Rye, or, something like, sometimes it's just more mechanical,
Yeah, true. Okay.
My other shifters, I almost used kind of Hawaiian names, I thought that would be cool, but there were so many vowels and they're quite unfamiliar names that I ended up steering away from. You know, by the time you get Kao and Kaeo and Kaua and yeah.
I live in California, remember? We get
Yeah.
a lot of the Hawaiians out here, and I'm like, you're what? You guys have 5 cousins and you all start with K? What?
Yes. Kane.
Okay, 1,
Yeah.
2, 3, and 4. All right, I'm gonna be quiet now before they start throwing things out.
And your Aloha series, do you have Higgins? Do you have a Higgins?
Yeah, I was so tempted. I have a Ferrari, right? I don't have Dobermans. I was so tempted. But I did have, until book 5, you didn't know who owned the estate. You know how like you never know who Robin Masters is, right? So it's among the shifters who lives there, there's this mystery of like, they're the caretakers of the estate, but the owner is a very private man and nobody knows his identity. And there's a lot of guesswork between them. Of who actually who is the rich guy here who owns the estate. So in that sense, there's that aspect of Higgins, but not so much I'm toying with how to bring in a Higgins-like character because he was a lot of fun, wasn't he?
Oh, he was my favorite. When I was a kid, I don't know, I liked Higgins. I wasn't very much into Magnum, but I was like, oh, I want to watch Higgins. What is he gonna say?
You see an interview with him, with the actor, and he speaks with his normal American accent. You're like, wait a minute, what did he do to him? Yeah, right.
Yes. So I would say Higgins was my favorite out of that TV program. But
I think in case you don't know, Higgins is so Magnum PI was I guess he's a Navy veteran and he's working as he's a private investigator, but he's taking care of security on this exclusive estate, which is owned by the author Robin Masters, and there's kind of the British caretaker, I guess you'd say, or what is that word? Batman. It's not Batman as in the hero, but it's kind of that like the gentleman servant kind of almost ish.
Yeah,
and always the foil to Magnum, right?
Yes. They are oil and water. I think that's a very good way to describe those two, but definitely go with that.
Yeah.
So far as an author, do you have like a favorite character? Like there's just, I mean, no characters are kind of like our children, but is there just that one favorite? You just have a favorite character in one of your series?
Every time I'm about to open my mouth and say, "Oh, it's definitely this one," then I'm like, "Oh, but wait a minute, I love this guy too." So I have a dozen book boyfriends, and I'm kind of. It's the great thing about fiction. You can pick, what the mood strikes you. On the day that you really need somebody to bring you a cup of hot chocolate, then you love that character. That's your favorite that day because he's the kind of guy who would do that, or. The day that you just really want to, zoom somewhere fast in the back of a motorcycle, or on the front of the motorcycle with the guy in the back. Yeah. So I jump back and forth. It's just like you said, it's like your children, in the sense you cannot pick a favorite. And there's not one that I don't love. And like I say, every time I want to open my mouth and say, oh, it's Kai. But then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, what about Silas? And you go, oh, Silas. And you get all, so yeah, I jump around.
I kind of feel the same way.
Right.
So as far as like on more of a personal question, as far as like who Anna is there one thing that you're really passionate about, just like in your personal life? And for me, it happens to be veterans and Gold Star families. So is there that one thing that you're really passionate about in your day-to-day life?
I guess I never did it specific kind of intentionally, but I think I'm like my love of nature and kind of environment and balance of nature, or the difficulty of quickly losing the balance of nature and kind of wanting desperately to do something about that. That comes through in a lot of my books. A lot of my books are really I have a ranch in Arizona where you're really tied to the land, and the land really speaks to you. There's the kind of the spirit there, so to speak, or Maui, just the beauty of it, and just to think of how fragile it is at the same time as being so grand. And I think that comes through in a lot of my books.
So you take your daily passion and just kind of put it into the theme of your books. Then is kind of what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, that's like, but I might almost state that the other way around. I think it kind of, it comes out. Yeah, I very rarely deliberately say, okay, and now I'm going to bring in, but it just kind of comes out. I think anytime your heart is in a story, those, what really means the most to you comes out.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Now, is there one thing that you struggle with as an author that you like I said, just struggle, but and find a way to overcome those struggles?
Do you mean in writing a story or overall as a writer?
As a writer overall, and something is it do you struggle with staying on task, or is it that maybe your struggles are more of where to go with a story, or whatever that may be, but as far as a writer goes?
Yeah, I guess I struggle with wanting to do too much at once. And you've got a family and you've got a day job and you're writing books, and you've got fans who are writing, and you've got 10 more stories in your head and you want to get them all out at the same time. Inevitably, every story I write, no matter how excited I am, even if it's one of those that really flows, there's inevitably a point in the center or toward the middle that I kind of get stuck in terms of the plot. Like, I know where the end is going to be, but to realistically get the characters there, I'm like, what's going to happen now to realistically get me there? I often have a point in the middle that I really have to stop, and I'm a plotter. So I plot the story at the beginning. I think I have it all set out, right? It's just like life. You think you got it all planned out, when suddenly, right? And then you get to a point you realize, oh, I didn't actually get the details. So I have to stop again and try to figure it out. And then usually I get going again. But I guess the other struggle I would have is just there's not enough time in the day, and to do everything you want to do as a writer. And you look at, I feel like I've done really well in the I think it's been 3 years that I've been writing and publishing fiction. But of course you look higher and you think, oh, I want to be like as successful as Electra, and you look and you're like, oh my God, Electra writes a book a month. I don't know. Do you write a book a month, Electra? You wanted it? No, not yet, right? But there's these dynamos that they're just churning out book after book, and some of them, certainly not all, but some they manage to maintain quality through that. And I will slow down. I don't want to just put out crap. I want to have a good story and good writing and good characters. But it's kind of, I guess, that to try to do everything that needs to be done I guess that would be my struggle.
No, I'm very envy of those people who have the ability to publish a book every month, because that takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication, especially if they're able to keep that.
Yeah, and I think they have a really mixed skill sets. People who can do the advertising, and I think that's the biggest. The marketing is many authors. It's not. You might be an introvert and you just, I just want to write my story and be creative, but you have to have the other side. Otherwise, people will not find your stories. So that's difficult too. That
I can imagine. Well, is there anything that you want the viewers to know just about you and your books or anything like that?
Where do I start? I guess, I think it's nice when people appreciate, they think of the real person behind the page. Yeah. So of course, you might be reading something about shapeshifters, but a person sat down and wrote that, right? And I think it's neat when I know a little bit more about an author, about, wow, she's a mom and she has kids, or she's climbed this mountain, Denali. I haven't climbed it yet. Someday I will. Mount McKinley, Denali. So yeah, it's nice when people understand that you're not at a typewriter in a little cabin with somebody bringing you food and taking away your dirty dishes. You're the one doing that for everybody else. That they just appreciate the real person behind behind the scenes. But you know, it's really funny. I don't know, this is kind of tangential, but I write contemporary, the kind of action adventure, and paranormal. And it's so funny because my contemporaries, if they get criticism, they get things like, oh, that's not realistic. And it's all based on things that either have happened to me, like my wildest adventures, or things that I've read or friends, right? And it's absolutely could totally happen. And yet people read shifters and have never ever heard like, oh, you know, a dragon. It is never an issue, right? But you have a guy, you know, riding a motorcycle over, you know, a rope bridge, like, oh no, that is not realistic. It is so funny. Or a doctor character based on a relative of mine, and they're like, that woman is such not a doctor. It's like, yeah, that's the point. You know, she's really cool. She's different than all those doctors who, you know, who think they're such experts. It's funny. I always laugh at that. How
the reviews, yeah. But it's kind of like they always say that real life is stranger than fiction. So
absolutely.
I've heard of readers complaining about mundane things in a fantasy setting, like, oh, the character would never eat their potato that way. Or like, okay, they just fought a dragon and you're complaining about the potatoes not being realistic.
It's so funny, yeah. They're just so willing to digest the huge things. But you know, and I learned a good lesson from, if you watch the making of Lord of the Rings. I'm such a Lord of the Rings fan. You know, when, you know, how now it's been a while, right? What is it, like 15 years? Oh my God! But you watch the making of, and it's really interesting to hear how they sold the world, right? Like the Hobbit, the sizes, right? And they spent a lot of time into trying to, like, playing with perspective to get, you know, a tall Gandalf and a shorter like Frodo, and how they played with perspective and stuff, and how they really invested a lot of time early in the movie to establish that. And if you look at the later scenes, they know at that point they have the audience has bought it, so they don't spend that much time anymore on those details. And I think that really works in writing as well. Like, if you really have a strong boom, it takes off from the beginning, and right away you're flying with a dragon and you're just in this whole other world, then you're not then you buy it. Then all of a sudden you're absorbed and you put aside that skepticism.
Right. I think I know exactly what you're talking about. You have to lay the scene early, and then it's not jarring when you kind of reiterate details like a little bit later on.
Yep.
So we have come to the end of the podcast. As is a tradition, you have agreed to a giveaway, which we will host on our blog. Can you tell us a little bit about your box set for your Aloha shifters?
Sure. I have a box set called Lure of the Alpha. It's the books 1, 2, and 3 of the Aloha Shifters series. And it also has a bonus. I love writing bonus scenes for all of my stories. Do you ever get that? You finish a story and there's something that's not in the main thread of action, but it's kind of a fun little revisit scene. Yeah?
Yeah.
So each book comes with a bonus scene. I normally write the bonus scenes so that people who subscribe to my newsletter have an extra. So that's one way to get them. But the box set has the books with bonus scenes. So you get book 1, bonus scene, book 2, bonus scene, and book 3, bonus scene. So a copy of Lure of the Alpha.
Okay. In order to be entered in a random drawing to win an ebook copy of the box set, you do need to go to our blog, which is focusonfantasyromance.wordpress.com, and make a comment on this episode, number 57, Ask Anna a Question. And that will enter you to for a chance to win. We'll leave it open for 30 days, so January 16. Where can our audience listeners find you?
The best place.
What are your social links?
Yeah, the best place to find me is www.annalowebooks.com. On Facebook, I'm Anna Lowe Books. And there you can find, my website is probably the best spot because you have all my links and you can find my audio. First audio you get is free, right? If you're new to audio, that's a lot of people don't know that. And my newsletter is there, and I give away 3 free books and a bunch of bonus scenes. So people have a chance, because you need to know whether you like an author or not. So Anna Lowe, www.annalowebooks.com.
And that's Lowe with an E.
Perfect.
I will have links in the show notes. So thank you for joining us.
It's been great. Thank you for having me. Thank you for everybody listening.
You're very welcome. Listeners, if you like the podcast, please like, comment, and share. This has been episode number 57. Have a nice night.
Good night.